It's been 8 years since I've run a Spartan race. When we moved to Africa, I just haven't had the opportunity over there. It's not offered. So this summer when I was back in Utah, I decided to run a Spartan Beast. If you're not familiar with these races, they have different lengths. There's a sprint, which is like a 5K, a super, which is a 10K, and a Beast is 21K. And they usually take place in like rough settings, like ski resorts up in the mountains, places like that. And then there's 30 obstacles you have to face during the race also. So I wasn't super prepared for this, but I was excited to try it again, and I'm going to give you an update, some of the pros and cons and how things went. So with these races, about every 15 minutes, they'll start a new group of runners, probably around 100 or so. They are on a big group as they head up the mountain, and slowly they'll start to spread out. This race took place in Snow Basin, a ski resort, and so they have lots of steep climbs, lots of crazy hills, and then some deep, hard descents that are hard to navigate. The path also is not a nice running trail, but sometimes it's just like rock that's just slipping under your feet. And it's a miracle more people don't get hurt. My biggest concern going in was the fact that my elbows have been messed up for months now. It's probably been 4 months since I've been able to lift weights regularly, so I've lost a lot of strength in my upper body. Fortunately, I got about 80% of the challenges I was able to complete and the obstacles. However, any of the type of monkey bar type things where you're reaching far like this with grip strength, just too much pain in the elbows, I couldn't do it. I was fortunate to be able to do like the herc hoist and the rope climb and some of those other ones, but anything where it looks like a monkey bar type climb and you're hanging for a long time, I would have to opt for the penalties. And I was glad to see that now, instead of just having to do 30 burpees if you mess up, you can actually do a penalty loop and run a little bit further. Now, the interesting thing about this race, it was supposed to be about 13 and a half miles, but according to my Garmin GPS, I did 14.83 because of all those 4 or 5 extra penalty loops I had to do when I'd mess up on some of those challenges. One thing I quickly remembered is how much more difficult it is to do trail running than just to do a standard 5K or half marathon where you're just plugging away on the asphalt and getting in a rhythm, because it's so much more dangerous with the terrain, rocks and roots. You're jumping over things, you're sliding, your footing isn't ever secure. And so you have to be really careful, take choppy steps, have your hands out to your side for balancing. And instead of running like a 7.5 mile pace like I would on a race, I averaged anywhere from 13 miles was the fastest mile, 36 was the longest mile, and that was up a straight hill where you're basically climbing on your hands and knees to get up it. So it was pretty challenging. Because I haven't done this for a long time, obviously, as you would expect, I did about an hour slower than last time when I did the Montana one, about 8 years ago. But I actually did better in my age group. I guess that helps when you're old and do stuff. There's less people competing against you. So let's talk a little bit about some of the positive and negatives of these type of races. First, with the negative, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the cost. They're pretty pricey, probably around $150 average for a race like this. There might be some less depending when you sign up, how long the race is, that sort of thing. But it's an expensive thing. Also, the photo package, if you want to get pictures of yourself on the course, it can be pretty expensive too. They're charging like $39 for that. And no one's going to want to take a cell phone or some electronics that are going to get destroyed and crunched and broken screen and in mud pits. So it's not really conducive to take your own stuff unless you've got a sturdy GoPro. And then really the only other negative would be just the fueling along the way. They did have water at least every mile, sometimes maybe every 2 miles, but they had plenty of water, but a lot of times it was warm, and you got bananas like on 3 times along the way. So it's just water and bananas though, but for that price, you'd think they might throw in some electrolytes or some other little snack things to keep you going, because it's 3 to 7 hours for most people doing that. So you need more fuel. So that's one thing I wish they had a little bit better job of, is some more fuel along the way of the race. So you'd really have to bring your own stuff. Okay, then on to the positives. It's a very challenging course, huge amount of terrain you're running over, beautiful views though. Even though you're suffering and feel like dying, it's nice to be able to look over some of these just massive views and see the areas, this beautiful area you're running on. There's a lot of staff and volunteers helping to run it. And I mentioned that it's kind of expensive, but I can see why, because they're hauling in heavy equipment and setting up for weeks and weeks prior to. It's not just like a 5K where you can tape off and have a cop stopping traffic in 1 or 2 places, but they're doing a lot of work to get these races set up. So it's a lot of work goes into these. And then the other thing I appreciate is just usually with most of the participants, there's some pretty good camaraderie, sportsmanship, encouragement among your other racers there who are just also suffering and just all trying to get through it together. Now, if I were to ask myself if I would go on a 14-mile trail run up in the mountains with obstacles, spending half my afternoon in the hot July summer, the answer is
no, hell no.
So if it weren't for races organized like this, there's no way I'd try this stuff. But I'm grateful they offer it. It gives you a chance to overcome a lot of physical challenges as well as mental while you're doing it. One of the more embarrassing things about the race is when I got about 95% of the way through, I'm almost done, I get to the dunk ponds, and I realized my reading glasses had been clipped to my shirt from earlier in the morning, and I went through the whole race with it. I have no idea how they didn't come off. When you're inverted on ropes, hanging out, crawling under barbed wire, rolling around in mud, jumping over hard obstacles, smashing my body into things, and they were just fine. So that was the miracle of the race, that my glasses were okay and that I was dumb enough to take some reading glasses with me on that course. One of my favorite things after a Spartan race is usually to watch a week or so later. They will post on YouTube the elite runners, the professionals, to show how well they did. This year, Hawk Call won. I think it was a little over 3 hours he finished the course in. And these guys are just so efficient and so fast. They make it look so easy. So I got a lot of respect for them, but at the same time, I really respect just the average day guys and girls out there that are working so hard on these courses, trying to overcome something big. That's inspiring to me. I went with my son, who's never run more than 3 miles at a time, and this almost killed him, but he did it. I was super proud of him. And the funny thing, I thought he'd say, I'm never doing that again. But as he's hydrating in the tent afterwards, he said, next time I'm going to be better prepared for this. So that's kind of fun to see when you get excited and you get the itch for doing this again, even though it's such a horrible, sucky thing. All right, so if you're considering doing a Spartan run and you haven't before, just a couple quick things of advice I would give you. First of all is you just got to practice some trail running. Get good at running up and down hills, because it's 90% of the race is just running the whole time. Those obstacles are just fun things to break it up, the monotony of it, but the vast majority of this is going to be running up and down. So the better you can be at that, the easier this race is going to be. And the second thing, I would encourage anyone that's want to run one of these, pay extra and go to the early heats that leave earlier, like 7 or 8 in the morning, as opposed to these people leaving at 11 and 12 at noon. That's just ridiculous. You're just going to be roasting in the sun. It's so much harder in the heat. So that's my words of advice for this. Anyway, if you've run an obstacle course race or a Spartan or Tough Mudder, I'd love to hear any comments you've got. It's a fun challenge, but it's something you want to prepare for, which I will try and do better next time.
It was really tough. It was fun. I enjoyed it. It was definitely a different ball game, but I had a blast.
Join me for next week's video. I'm going to try and recreate some classic 80s dunk contest dunks on lower rims, if I can get walking without limping again by then.
Push the button.
Do it.